All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Prevention Community of Practice, our September meeting. Today's topic is the impact of ACEs on substance use disorder and implications for the prevention field. And this is part one of a two-part session. We'll also be focusing on ACEs in November 11th or November 6th. So if you want to note that down, we'll be continuing the conversation at our November meeting, and it will also be in the Concord area, maybe not in this room. My name is Melissa Schammel. I work for the Community Health Institute Center for Excellence, and I am the coordinator for this Prevention Community of Practice. So welcome, everyone. I'm joined here by our planning team, which consists of Adelaide Murray in the back, helping me compile those sign-in sheets. So if you did not sign in, please remember to do so before you leave. And also we have an evaluation in your packet. So if you could fill that out, we'll be collecting those at the end. So just a reminder to sign in. Also, Rekha Sridhara from the Community Health Institute is also on our planning team, and Julie Yerkes and Beth O'Connell are also here from our planning team. Jill Burke and Rob O'Hannon from BDAS could not be here today. So we are going to give some time to have everyone around the room say your name and your organization, just so everyone can get a better idea of who's in the room and what perspectives are going to be represented today. So we'll start with Linda.
I'm Linda Douglas with the New Hampshire Coalition. I'm Laura McGowan. I'm with the New Hampshire Teen Institute. Lisa Myers from the Community Health Institute. Sarah Breslin with Life of an Athlete and the China Boy.
Then Stroke, Life of an Athlete and China Boy.
Barbara Krause, Maryland Valley High School, and Secretary. We're going to have public health and work.
Thank you, Rizal, from Public Health and Far along SMC for Strategy Public Health Network. Thank you, Christina, SMC for the People's Public Health Network.
Ace Troy for the Community Action for Safety, Silicon Valley.
Monica Malaya, for the Girls Public Silicon Valley and Community Action for Safety.
John Pender and CO2 for
Dr. O'Connell is to the upper room to learn about strategy and
the 3D college counselor SAT, White Mountains Community College.
Lisa Walker, Governor Community Restorative Justice.
Jennifer Selfridge, Carroll County Public Health.
Select Park, Coalition for Youth.
Colin Scott, Silver Rockingham Coalition for Healthy Youth, and Community Services. With Kathleen Kirsch, COC, Carroll County Coalition for Public Health and Illinois.
Awesome, Berwick Public Schools, Office of Student Wellness.
Cross National Canada Passport.
Vicki Hebert, Dover Coalition for Youth. Rachel Combs, Senior Health Institute. Oh, yeah, of course, partnership with public health, with the Kentucky Public Health Network.
Way partnership with public health and Kentucky, region. Dr. Franklin Mayor's Task Force.
Everyone. Thank you, everyone, for doing that. I know it's a tough spot first thing, but I think it's really helpful for people to know who else is in the room. And for networking purposes, you might hear a name or someone that was in your community that you aren't familiar with. So hopefully you can make those connections to this community of practice. So for those whose first community of practice meeting is a few new folks in the room, welcome. So happy that you guys could come. And for those who are sitting and don't have a table in front of them, there are a couple spots you want to make a little bit more comfortable. Feel free to move if you want to. So welcome, everyone. I just want to reiterate the purpose of the prevention community of practice. We started, our first meeting was back in March, so this is our youngest community of practice. We have a few others on the whole continuum, but the purpose of this community of practice is to increase best practice knowledge relative to effective prevention, to build collegiality and professional mentoring among those delivering prevention services, communication between and within clinical care addressing substance abuse, and to promote a recovery and resiliency-oriented set of principles and practice constructs. So there's multiple components that make up this community of practice. This in-person meeting that meets every other month is just one piece of the community of practice. We also have resources and tools on the Center for Excellence website. It has resources from past meetings and then also resources that are important to the field and is relevant to your work. So if you haven't checked that out, please do. Can't hear me? Is that better? Thank you, Addie. She's just running around. We also have a community of practice Google group. And so if you're not connected to that, you don't receive those emails. It's a great way to, if you don't know everyone's email address, to kind of throw out a question to the group, or if you're having an event, a community event that you'd like the whole state of prevention professionals to know about, you can share that on there as well. It's just a great way to connect with those that you might not know their contact information and have that dialogue between these meetings. The Center for Excellence also offers technical assistance, and you can request technical assistance through the Center for Excellence website. If you have any questions about what that means, feel free to reach out to me or anyone on the center staff. So our agenda today is jam-packed and is all focused on ACEs and how your work connects to ACEs. We did our welcome and introductions. I'm going to go over a little housekeeping with the contact list. I'm going to propose one. We're going to have a presentation with Linda Douglas. And then we're also going to have a facilitated discussion led by Lisa Murray. And we'll have wrap up and evaluations. Just another reminder to please complete your evaluations and make sure that we check off your name as you leave the door in order to get those CPS credits. Our objectives today are to describe ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences, and their impact on substance use disorder, to identify prevention strategies that minimize the impact of ACEs, and to discuss how current prevention work connects to and affects ACEs. So just to take a step back real quick, at our last planning meeting, it was brought up that it'd be really helpful for people to know, like there's an echo, for people to know who else is a part of this group and their email and what communities they work for and what role they have.
Do others feel like that might be helpful for people to have access to such a list? It would be opt-in, obviously, we wouldn't just add you to a list. So we were thinking, and planning team, please pipe in. We were thinking your name, your organization, your role, which community you serve, and just an email address. Is there anything else we think would be helpful on that list? Phone number? So I think at our November meeting, we're gonna kind of pull the list together based on what we have for information from the community of practice already. And if you don't want to be on it, you can cross your name off. That's up to you. Or if you can edit your information, we'll have the list to be modified at our next community of practice. And thinking that this list would be posted on the community of practice resource site. So I'm just gonna propose that, and it looks like I'm getting some head nods that would be helpful. So we're gonna do that, and then if you're like, oh no, my information's not going on there, then that's fine. All right, so we're gonna do that, and I hope that it's helpful. I hope that it helps connect people a little bit better. Then they feel like they're connected now, especially for new folks or people who are newer to their communities. I think it could be helpful to kind of get a better understanding of who else is in their community. All right, so I am going to hand it over to Linda Douglas, who is from the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, and she is going to give a presentation on ACEs and substance use disorders.
Is that a clicker I can use?
Yes, yeah.
Good morning. I'm really excited about this because it's nice to know that after I get done talking today, even though I'm going to disappear because this is my first of 3 sessions today, is that you're going to actually take this information and try to come up with some plans to be able to do some prevention work out of it. So that's really great. So the important part, starting out, and I'm going to be going through this really fast because I was given a short period of time and I'm used to, I'll slow down a little bit. So keep calm. Okay, this is going to be a lot of information on trauma, and I'm certain that you've all been to trauma presentations before, but when you get done, you sort of feel like, oh, that was a lot of information, and it brought up my own personal trauma, or it brought up trauma of the people I'm working with. While I'm talking, sort of distance yourself from it by thinking about somebody with whom you're working and how this would apply to them and what positive information you can take out of this in order to be able to help the persons with whom you're working. So we really want to be able to understand the trauma and the average childhood experiences, because what we learned is that so many people that we come across with have experienced trauma throughout the years. And everybody's getting a copy of this at some point, right?
Yes, everyone has to.
Okay, you've got it. Okay, great. Oh, thank you. That's right. So any questions or comments you have, please, let's make this a discussion rather than me just talking to you for the next hour. And I don't mind getting interrupted. I've learned to call it inserted squirrels. I can be distracted on my own by squirrels, but you know, if people want to insert a squirrel for me to get distracted, I can go ahead and go with that. That was a new thing that came up last week. I really like that. So we want to really be tuned into the fact, as we know with trauma-informed services, it's about being able to look at the people and that we're serving, that we're supporting, and instead of looking at them and going, huh, what's the matter with you? We want to take that step back and say, I wonder what happened to you and how that impacted your life. So who here, it feels like they're pretty familiar with the average childhood experiences study? All right, and who has never heard of it at all? Okay, and who feels like they can always learn a little bit more? So I'm going to breeze through this fairly quickly, but as you know, this was a study that originated in San Diego, California. I like to remind people that this study came about in a largely upper middle class, lower upper class socioeconomic group, primarily white. Maybe about 10 to 15 people, 10 to 15 of the respondents of over 10,000 people fell into an other category. So the average childhood experiences that we end up seeing are common for that particular group and may not necessarily be common for all groups. So here's Patty, and I think this is where it really starts to apply to your work with substance use disorders. So Patty started out in the weight loss program that Dr. Folletti was running, and she was weighing at 408 pounds. Through the course of the year, she got down to 132 pounds, lost 270 pounds. And if we look at Patty on your left side, we could say that her problem is she just eats too much. She doesn't exercise. Some people will maybe call her lazy and come up with other not very nice things to say about her. But they're saying that the obvious problem here is that Patty eats too much. And once she stops eating, she gets down to 132 pounds. But Patty comes up and she gets down to week 60 after having lost all that weight. And all of a sudden the weight comes back on again very quickly. We know that a lot of people who lose weight will start to put it back on again slowly, but she's putting it on very quickly. And Dr. Folletti is trying to figure this out. And so he sits down with her and he's got pretty good rapport with her. And he says, what happened? What happened here? Has anyone heard this story? And you go back and you find out that Patty, while she was working, her boss, who was about 20, 30 years older than her, started to sexually harass her and described to her in pretty graphic terms the things that she could do for him now that she had lost weight if they got a motel room. And Dr. Folletti was not quite, this was early 90s, late 80s, not quite sure the time period, but it was definitely before Anita Hill, it was before Monica Lewinsky, it was before all of the Me Too stuff that we've seen over the past couple of years. So Dr. Folletti looks at her and he says, why was that such a big deal? So who wants to let me know why that was such a big deal? What had happened to Patty? She had been sexually abused as a child between the ages of 9 and 12. And so now we know that the weight for her, the food for her was not the problem. The problem was actually the childhood sexual abuse. And that what we see as problems are actually people's solutions to the problems. I was a substance abuse counselor for many years in Virginia and here over in Cheshire County for a while before I came to the coalition. And I was working with a young man one day who had been using heroin. He managed to stop. He was about 21 years old. He stopped using heroin, and he described that now what he was doing was smoking marijuana medicinally, which was a bowl every 4 hours. And this was, of course, before medical marijuana, but he had prescribed himself, if I can have a bowl every 4 hours, I will be okay. And he looked at me and he said, I'm not addicted to drugs. I said, you're not? He said, no, I'm addicted to not feeling my feelings. And this was a young man that I could not, for the life of me, get to talk about his childhood. It was like, nope, I'm not going to talk about that. Everything's okay. It's all in the past. It's not. But he would say, I'm using, so I can't feel my feelings. And it's so prevalent. I've talked to sexual assault nurse examiners who work in emergency rooms at hospitals, who have people come in who have overdosed a couple of times, and the nurse will look at them and say, why do you keep doing this to yourself? And the person will say, because it makes the unacceptable acceptable. So it's about having had those experiences that now they're using the drugs, the alcohol, and other non-productive behaviors, which could be gambling, the sex addiction, all the addictions, process addictions, and substance addictions that we work with every day, can possibly be the result of these adverse childhood experiences. And here's just, just some statistics that, you can look at on your slides. And here are the adverse childhood experience conditions. And when I was looking at those, when I first started doing this work and learning about the ACEs and studying the ACEs, I was thinking to myself, I really wonder what else could possibly be in there. And that's when I went to Dr. Folletti. I saw him at a conference and I said, all of those things are there and I can see that they're trauma. But I had two things happen to me as a kid that I know have influenced me and influenced my eventual addictions. And that was the loss of a sibling when I was 3 years old and medical trauma when I was a toddler. Those things impacted me and my family and led to a number of other things happening. And he said to remember, this is just for that group of people in San Diego, California. That what this does is it just lets us know that the ACEs are there to let us know that adverse childhood experiences are common and that they lead to long-term problems. And so one of the reasons why you're in the room today is because of this particular slide here, is that we understand that the adverse childhood experiences lead to the long-term neurological impacts and health risks and serious lifelong consequences towards the end. Possibly early death or a lower quality of life. But what I look at this and I've tried to, I'm not a very good graphic artist. So one of the things I really want to do is point out that this is a circle. Okay? Because we know that these adverse childhood experience conditions lead to the serious lifelong consequences. But as I often tell DCYF when I'm working with child protective service workers who are complaining about the parents and how the parents aren't doing enough for their kids, I say, I want you to remember, these parents were here and got lost in the system and in the cracks and don't trust you because of how they got lost in the system 20, 30, 40 years ago. So that's where the prevention efforts need to come in a number of ways, is we want to prevent the adverse childhood experiences. But what can we do to support families, parents who've already experienced those adverse childhood experiences, and how they can be supported so they don't set up and live in conditions that create adverse childhood experiences for their own children. So any comments or questions or discussions so far? Yes. Yes.
But where are those people that, is there any sort of percentage that they would say that this results in the substitute? Because we know that like some people aren't necessarily, get introduced to whole foods, but they buy, them doctor and, shut off and then they want to,
I'm not really big on statistics, and just for the recording, he wanted to know what's the percentage of people who got addicted by means other than trauma, right, other than that, because of prescriptions and those types of things. What's hard is that we don't necessarily know for those people who were prescribed what their trauma history may have been. Because like that young man that I talked about, he didn't want to talk about his trauma history. And so he could have been prescribed an opiate and seen as having gotten addicted after being prescribed, but he was already set up to being addicted at the time that prescription was written. And we don't know. But we do know that trauma occurs more often than not. And we know that it changes the brain. So that these brain changes have a tendency to influence whether or not someone's going to become addicted in the future. I think there's so many layers to this that it's really difficult to come up with those statistics. Because, well, I'm going to get into expanding this a little bit, and I'll go into some of those layers. And as I show the layers, you're going to see different places where some interventions could have taken place that could have prevented substance use. So we're just going to go with that. So here are some genetic factors that I want you to take a look at. So here we have having a history of child abuse, but we also know that belonging to minority groups, lower socioeconomic status, lower educational level, being a female, severity, and genetic factors. I'll get into that a little bit more. I'm going to take out these prevalence for the sake of time. But I like this genogram of a trauma case study, okay? Because there's a lot of addiction in my family. So I did this genogram because I was supposed to, it is not a, doesn't have all the graphics, but I did this just to try and figure things out. And it just isn't just a one generation thing. If somebody becomes addicted, it is likely that it's not just because something happened to them, but because something happened to the generations previously. And the big reason why I did this was because when I was taking my substance abuse classes back in the mid-90s, I was reading a book called Under the Influence, which I don't think don't put it down, it's not worth reading. don't write it down. And the reason is in there, it stated this myth as true, that people who were Native American or Irish were just genetically predisposed to alcoholism. Did you hear that? Okay, how many Irish do we have in the room? Okay, how many Native American do we have in the room? Oh, come on, give me a couple. So I thought, sheesh, I'm screwed, okay? It explained a lot of that had been going on in my life, but I was like, really, is this really what it is? But if you really roll back and think about both the Irish and the Native Americans, the oppression that occurred against both of those groups created the conditions which led to the addictions. But since the history books are always written by the oppressor, we get the, oh, they must have been genetically predisposed to this in the first place. Okay? So just a quick run through. So here's my maternal grandparents, my mother's mother. My grandmother was institutionalized in her 40s for depression. My grandfather was placed in an Indian boarding school at the age of 10. He grew up with an alcohol use disorder, and they raised 5 children during the Great Depression. Now, those of you who don't know what happened in Indian boarding schools over the past century, I just invite you to take a look at some of that. As my grandfather said, they beat the Indian out of them. And there were other horrible things that happened to children in those schools. My father's side is French Canadian and Irish. And my grandmother, a bitter woman, raised 11 children during the Great Depression. She married twice, both were alcoholics. My grandfather abandoned that family during the Depression, came back, we think, probably to the house about 11 times. And had alcohol use disorder. So then on my mother's immediate, 2 brothers were alcoholics, 2 out of her 4 brothers. 2 were physically abusive to their children and wives. 1 was a pedophile. My mother had 4 children, 1 who died at the age of 2. 2 children had medical traumas, and my mother had anxiety and depression. So here when you're thinking about depression, this is a really important piece. Prevention. In here, these things, the 4 children and the medical traumas, all happened to my mother before she turned 25. So she was a young mother who had a child die. One child spent months in the hospital after having been burned, and the other one had chronic conditions when she was born. So all of that before she was 25. And when you think about brain development, she was still basically a teenager when she went through all of this. My father had 10 siblings, a number of whom had alcohol use disorders. He was a Korean War veteran. He had a food addiction. Whenever he tried to cut down on his sugar, we could go out to the car and find multitudes of Twinkie wrappers underneath the seat. Of course, he had PTSD from his childhood, living with the bitter woman with the 10 siblings. And he also had anger issues and prone to be an abuser. He had control issues, number of things going on there. So all of that, so we can see where could, for my generation, do you think about this? What prevention could have been put in place to support this family so that in this generation, I did not have alcohol, food, and shopping as my addictions. My brother is a gamer. My sister struggles with food and shopping addictions. Both my sister and I were sexual assault victims. My brother insists, now he's much younger than my sister and I. He came along when I was 17 and my sister was 13. We refer to him as the second coming, but that's a whole other thing. He insists he's the healthiest one in the family. But our ACEs are really not considered that high. But when you look at previous generations and the adverse childhood experiences that happened there, it tells a lot about this family. And so we want to be able to take a look when we're talking to someone and remember it's not just what happened, that there's something wrong with you. It's taking that step back and saying, I wonder what happened to you, but also I wonder what's happened to previous generations in your family. So the adverse childhood experiences pyramid, which used to start with just the adverse childhood experiences leading to disrupted neurodevelopment, social, emotional, and cognitive problems, all the way up to early death. They've now taken and they're looking at social conditions and local context and the generational embodiment and historical trauma that underlie these adverse childhood experiences. So now our prevention work is how do we address adverse childhood experiences? Well, we take a look at the social location and historical trauma for particular groups. So social location is all of these things. Geographic location, we've heard of zip code studies on how people in certain regions of certain areas of the state are prone to more issues than others. We think about high density populations, the amount of violence that occurs in high density areas, and in rural populations. I was just reading in the newspaper the other day, I think, who's from Berlin? There's somewhere up in the North Country, a grocery store is closing down, and so now it's going to be a 30-minute trip in order to make a run for groceries. So that leads to food insecurity, which is what happens when you've got a family that can afford only one car. How are all of these things going to be taken care of? Access to health care, all of these things. Your family status, race, ethnicity, occupation, your sexuality, all of these things are going to impact how many adverse childhood experiences you have, how they're going to affect how resilient you're going to be when you're experiencing adverse childhood experiences. So you want to have safe access to quality health care, economic opportunities, social connections, and social capital. All of these things and any prevention work needs to be taken into consideration. How are we going to support at-risk families? Like mine was back in the late 50s, early 60s. Very at risk with a number of things that were going on. I often say my mother could have really used a family support center. I could have used a family support center when I had my son because I had severe postpartum depression. And it certainly would have been nice to have something. I'm not going to show this film, but so it all comes back to dear old Abraham Maslow. I only pull him out every once in a while, but you know, it seems like every class I had in grad school, we saw Abraham Maslow. And sometimes, I loved the boss that I had when I was doing shelter and substance abuse work down in Norfolk, Virginia. And she came from Jane Addams School of Social Work. And she wanted to be able to move to that self-actualization level very quick with people. And so a project that she had in mind that she thought would prevent future domestic violence was if we could get women in our shelter looking at owning a home within 5 years. When I talked to the women in the shelter about that, they said, we don't know where we're going to be next month. I don't know how I'm going to feed my kids tomorrow. You're telling me I can only be here for 6 to 8 weeks. I need this. And maybe we can get them into a little bit of belongingness and love, but we need to be working on all of this. Our prevention work needs to start at the bottom of this pyramid and work its way up, because you can't have that without this. So how do we support families in getting those things? Until we are willing to acknowledge that we collectively have not fulfilled the needs of developing humans throughout our evolution, and therefore, as adults, we are not operating at our optimal capacity as human organisms, we will continue to perpetuate the social conditions that hinder optimal development, all the while pretending that we adults are unaffected and traumatic childhoods are normal. That is my fear when we're talking about the adverse childhood experiences sometimes, is that not only are we normalizing it, it's now some people are going to sit back and say, adverse childhood experiences are normal. That's just the way the world is. You know, and then we just sit back and not think about, well, maybe we can move beyond that. So I already talked a little bit about historical and cultural trauma. Cultural trauma is, to me, an ACE or a whole culture group. Okay? So the collective experience of violence perpetuated against a group in the process of colonization that results in a humanitarian crisis for that community. That's historical trauma. Living under such difficult, oppressive circumstances can lead parents to formulate fear-based survival messages that they pass on to their children and grandchildren. Ideas like, don't ask for help, it's dangerous. So you have a number of people that you may be working with who you know there's something going on, but they're not going to tell you because of the secrecy that gets passed down from generation to generation. And so how, when we're doing prevention, do we work at breaking that silence? Because now that I'm standing here thinking about it, going back to the normalization of childhood trauma, if we normalize childhood trauma, that helps keep it silent. It's like, oh, that just happens to everybody. Don't worry about it. Because I've seen that happen in my domestic violence work, where a number of people from my generation or my mother's generation, well, that's just the way relationships are. you just learn to put up with it. And we're trying to change that. So those groups will share stress due to the ongoing discrimination and microaggressions. They will have the hyperarousal feelings of alienation within their group. And they're going to perceive others as dangerous. And I'm sure you can think of things that are happening in our country at this time that falls into all of this. And that feeling that you have to manage everything in your own community because you don't know what's going to happen in the community at large. What are they going to do with you? I see this when I worked in Norfolk, Virginia for many years. One of the things that I noticed is that there were very few children of color in the foster care system. Because what the community of color had done is they would absorb them. The aunts would take care of them. The grandmothers would take care of them. Because we don't want our children outside of our community because we need to be able to keep an eye on them. The indigenous community has tried this for years, trying to keep their children from being adopted outside of the community because they want to be able to keep them within their culture. So there's that altered sense of identity and lack of personal agency and structures that were broken by oppressive systems that dismantled their societies. And we've seen all the intergenerational trauma studies. I'm actually making good time, aren't I? Because this is in my work. I don't know. Okay, because there's one phone with it. I mean, I know it'll click on it, but so intergenerational trauma, children of Holocaust survivors and descendants of Japanese people who were in internment camps. We've also identified it in children of American vets. If you grew up with a veteran, as I look around the room, we could have people in here who grew up with parents who were in the Korean War, the Vietnam War, or you were in a war yourself and you've raised children, know that the impact of your service time greatly affects your children in a number of ways. So again, that separation, adverse childhood experiences, the list that we see before, separation from the parent. A parent who's not in the home is an adverse childhood experience. And then having that parent return with post-traumatic stress disorder, that's a parent who has a psychiatric disorder or depression, and that's another adverse childhood experience. 45% of American veterans' children exhibit significant signs of PTSD, with 83% having elevated hostility scores and more dysfunctional social and emotional problems. Just as an aside, this one always sort of triggers me because, like I said, my father was a Korean War vet. He had, of course, because of the child abuse that he experienced and everything that he experienced as a kid, he had these anger issues. And I remember my mother looking at me one time as an adult, and she said to me, my mother, she was pretty much the queen of denial. So she would look at me one day and she goes, I just don't understand. All three of you kids seem to have this little edge of anger all the time. And I was like, really? I just don't understand. But it was, all of these things in there. So what can be done to support families of veterans? So we have childhood victimization increases risk for abuse as an adult, coping strategies. People don't learn to protect themselves from harm. So I want to go up to coping strategies, and they don't learn to protect themselves from harm. I've already talked about these two pieces here in the middle. So I was doing a training for DCYF one day on the impact of domestic violence. And somebody said to me, well, I need you to tell me what I can do with this woman because she keeps choosing men who abuse her. I took a deep breath, let my eyes roll in the back of my head a little bit. But I eventually came up with this really weird analogy. I'm the queen of weird analogies. So here's what I've got. Take it that we're all born as perfect hard-boiled eggs. Now, given the generational violence and historical trauma, I'm sort of leaving that out here, but we're all a perfect hard-boiled egg. And the first thing that happens to us after birth is you crack that egg. It could be food insecurity, it could be neglect, it could be loss of a parent, but it's the first crack in that shell. And then, don't tell anybody what we're doing. Oh no, you can't say no. If you say no to me, I'm just going to hurt you more. Don't you tell anybody. You deserve everything that's happening to you. And then you have an adolescent or an adult who has no shell left. And you now have a vulnerable egg. And who do perpetrators look for? Vulnerable eggs. Vulnerable eggs don't go out looking for perpetrators. Perpetrators are looking for vulnerable people. And then we have a tendency to look at those vulnerable people. And we've done it in my field, and I've heard it done in other fields where we look at those people and we say, you just need to have better boundaries. And I think, wow, why does that person not understand what boundaries are? Because they never had them. They weren't allowed to have them. And now we have someone who may be going to a support group but still living with their abuser, and they go back to their abuser and they say, my counselor told me that I had to have better boundaries, so I'm going to start telling you no more often. What do you think is going to happen? It's going to be you tell me no, a lot of horrible things are going to happen to you. So it's about helping people get into safe and stable relationships. We want to help children keep their boundaries. That's why I love that so much of the early childhood prevention work now is about helping children know that they don't have to sit on somebody's lap if they don't want to. They don't have to give everybody who asks for a kiss. They learn how to feel safe in their own bodies, and that gets to carry with them. But we know that a lot of things that happen to children are because they've had their boundaries stripped from them at an early age. This is the video I'm on the show, Addie. Good luck, Addie. Normally, if I click on it, it goes right to it.
Yeah, so I just have to change the share real quick. So that our remote participant can see too. One. Yeah.
Hello.
Her name is Liz. If you want to say hi. All right, go here for now. And then we'll let the ad play.
With Grammarly, you can find really good. Now, hey, welcome back. Today, I really want to think about what's the best way to teach teachers about trauma without getting them distracted with all the technical stuff, and what's the most important thing for them to understand and learn. And I thought that the best way to do it might be to just make a difference between a learning brain versus the brain surviving mode. So we'll just call it learning brain versus survival brain. And this is the difference. So learning brain is this brain that's open to learning new information, and it's completely okay with ambiguity and gray and vagueness, and it sees the big picture. It like pulls back and is on the balcony to look over the forest and figure out what's going on. On an emotional level, people in learning brain feel calm, peaceful, maybe a little excited about what they're about to learn, maybe a little playful and having fun too, and definitely curious. And they're not afraid of making mistakes because it's just part of the learning process. And so they're not really thinking about themselves. And they actually feel a little bit of confidence that if they just apply themselves, they might pick up what they're trying to learn. Now, survival brain, on the other hand, is completely different. It's hyper-focused on threat. It doesn't like ambiguity. It wants clear, hard facts. It thinks in black and white terms. Doesn't want anything to be gray at all. And then emotionally, you can imagine that survival brain makes people feel panicky, feel like a little obsessive and afraid of doing things wrong. And they don't feel calm and open to learning new things. They just want to get things over with. And people in survival brain also really don't like making mistakes. And they are afraid of looking stupid too. So students in survival brain don't want to be picked on. They don't want to raise their hand and ask questions and look stupid. And so these people are also filled with doubt about their own ability to learn stuff. And they're afraid that other people can ask them to do that. Now, it's really important to understand how learning brain and survival brain interact. Because survival brain always trumps learning brain. And it makes sense because survival brain is just trying to save your life. And so if it thinks that there's something dangerous happening, you better pay attention to it, right? But the tricky thing is that as survival brain stays on longer and longer, it's harder to get out of that. And it's harder to really go into learning brain. And the way I think about it is kind of like a mythical. You know that guy who has to push a rock up a hill, and then every day it falls back down and you have to do it over and over again. Well, being in learning brain is like being up on the high top of that mountain. You can see the experience of what's going on, but it also takes a lot of work to be up there. And at any second, if you're not paying attention, make bring effort into it. It's so easy to slip back into survival brain again. And that rock that you think is trying to push up, well, that's kind of like stress. And the
So this rock is getting bigger because of the stress. And I like to point out here is that for a lot of people who have been living in survival brain for so much of the time, when they're looking at people living in learning brain up on the top of the hill, they're wondering, what's wrong with me? Why don't I deserve to live up on top of that hill? There must be something wrong with me. And so part of the stress is, the closer you get to the top of the hill is, if I get up there, people are going to find out I don't deserve to be here. And I'm going to come crashing down again. Or I don't have what it takes to be up here. I know how to survive down here, but I don't think I have what it is to survive up there. Again, that was sort of like moving people to owning that house in 5 years without helping them feel safe along the way up there. Or a gentleman told me a story a few weeks ago about being at a boys camp, and there was this one boy, he was at the bottom of the heap. He was on the spectrum, and he was being bullied, people, calling him names, all these types of things. Well, one day they had a basketball game, and he made the winning basket. And so he moved from here to here very quickly. Suddenly he was everybody's best friend. It was like, wow, you're great, all these things. But within 3 hours, he had a complete and total meltdown because he didn't know what it was like. That was too much pressure. How long can I stay here? I'd rather be down here. And as a substance abuse counselor for many years, I would see those people who would get to a certain point where they would self-sabotage. It may not be yeah, that word. It may not be conscious. Oh, forget it, Linda. But they would all of a sudden slip back into their old ways. And you talk to them and it was just like, oh, this is my neighborhood, these are my people, they don't want me to forget where I came from. Or, I just don't know what it's like to be out there. But sometimes it would be, I'm afraid if I get up there, I'm going to screw it up. And it's just going to hurt harder because I'm up there and I fall down. So part of the thing is to talk to people ahead of time as they're moving up the hill, is to check in with them. How's it going? How's it feeling? What do we need to do? Because I know this can get really scary. And sometimes people will give up their supports once they feel like they've gotten up there, and then they'll fall down. So those types of things. Let's go.
more stress you feel, the heavier and bigger that rock is, and it just pushes you back into survival brain quicker. Now, the kicker is that for traumatized people, Stress is a really rigid and intense thing. And so with trauma, any little stress makes that loss go way bigger than it normally would. And because people with trauma misperceive and view the situation that's threatening and stressful, that loss just stays big all the time. Now, the good news is that the more you control stress, well, the easier it is to be learning brain, right? Because that loss is a lot smaller. And what I really want to highlight to teachers is that the best way to keep students in the learning brain goes back to why I spent so much time talking about attachment. Students best learn when they feel like they're safe and supported by the adults around them. So it's kind of like a baby elephant. You know how like on those nature shows, a baby elephant is like playing with leaves or exploring a tree or something like that and having a lot of fun. And the only reason why they can do that is because there's a whole group of mama elephants around that baby, protecting it and looking out for danger. So kids with trauma or who's stuck in survival brain, it's kind of like that baby elephant who doesn't have protective adults around them. They can't play and learn because they're way too focused on looking out for danger. So this is why I really believe that the most important thing that schools need to focus on, way more important than any kind of techniques or curricula, is really whether or not they are creating that environment where students feel like they're surrounded by these big mama elephants who are going to protect them and watch out for them and make them safe. And when students have that, I bet you it unlocks their curiosity, their eagerness to learn, and play as a way to learn. So I hope that's helpful. Let me know if you have any questions and comments below.
So I love, ooh, what's happened? I got an echo.
I don't know what.
All right.
All right, let me just, I gotta reshare back to your PowerPoint.
Okay, I can keep talking now.
Mhm.
So what I like about this is that it's saying that it's not just one mama elephant. Okay, and we have heard through the ACE research over the past years that they say the biggest resiliency piece for a child is to have one caring adult in their life. Okay, one person that's there for them, one safe and stable person. But we know that the world doesn't necessarily work that way. So the more safe and caring people that we have around that child, it's going to be even better, because sometimes people leave for a number of reasons. Some people can't always be there. So it goes back to that community support. How much does that child know that there's anybody, a number of people that they can go to, a number of safe people that are there for them to help them build some resiliency. So when I look at the trauma framework and understanding of ACEs, yes, it recognizes that trauma is not the exception. It has talking about what's happened to you versus what's wrong with you. But it also shifts us from seeing things as symptoms to seeing things that people do as coping mechanisms that they learned while they were living in that traumatic situation. But the things that you learned growing up in a family with an alcoholic parent, with an abusive parent, with a large number of siblings, those things you're going to learn and do are going to be your survival mechanisms for growing up in that family. And that when you suddenly feel safe, well, not suddenly, but when you grow to feel safe and stable, you don't automatically get new survival skills based on your new conditions. Oftentimes they'll bring out all of these old ones. And so when you're working with a student who seems to be defiant, manipulative, less than honest, all of these things, those are basically survival strategies. One of the many reasons I left the mental health system was because I didn't like looking at things as symptoms. I saw everything as being an adaptive behavior. I didn't like input. I had a gentleman I was working with who had had severe childhood trauma. I knew what his childhood trauma was, and I was trying to work with him on relapse prevention. And I told him, I know what happened. We're not going to talk about that all the time. But every time he knew he had an appointment with me, he would start to panic. And when there were some days where he was really good, but some days he would start to panic. And he would end up at the store getting a case of beer, and somebody would come in and say, hey, I just saw your 11 o'clock appointment. He's heading down West Street with a case of beer and you're not coming in. And so, of course, in the mental health system, if you don't make 3 appointments in a row, you have to close them out and then start all over again. And I did that with this guy a couple of times until finally I thought, and they kept saying, because he's not being compliant with treatment. And finally I said, I don't think it's that he's not being compliant. I think our system doesn't work for him. He needs to have somebody come and see him rather than him having to come in to see me. So I got him a case manager to go out and see him, and then I told him, when you're having a good day and a day that you feel like you can talk to me, come in and check to see whether or not I have time on my calendar. And since he could only tolerate 10 to 15 minutes anyway, I could easily squeeze him in. I made the system work for him rather than expecting him to fall into that having to be compliant with the system and how he got blamed. And so, because each time he got closed out, he was being told, well, it's your fault you got closed out. You didn't show up. And so I think that works so much better if we can find ways to work with people rather than expecting them to try and work with us in our system. So resiliency, which I think is where a lot of prevention work has to come into it. We have resilient parents, then we can have families that are safe and stable, and that can prevent future ACEs for those children in that family. So the attachment leads to the self-regulation and the competency. And I think that's all I have up there. So I want to, let's go back to that. So I want to see, I've got plenty of time for discussion, but I know you're going to be discussing more with Lisa, so I don't want to take up a whole lot of time if you've got a lot of where you're going. So what's your thought, Melissa?
Well, I just wanted to open the room up to questions and comments for you. In your package, you have a handout of questions, and that's what we're going to do with Lisa, just so that you can figure out your questions. So while we have yeah.
I saw people nodding their head a lot, and even some people taking jotting little notes down. So did some ideas come up, or do you have any further questions, or do you want to wait until you get into the formal facilitated process with Lisa? Yes, sir.
I'm going to talk about the role of the people who have suffered trauma and how, like, early prevention, what the best practices you can implement.
So we used to have this belief that once something happened to a child, then it was written for life. But now we know, now I'm not a neurobiologist or anything like that, but we do know that the brain is very plastic and that it is able to create new neurons, new connections after some have been broken down during trauma. So a child is going to develop those neurons and have very strong neurons that are based on those survival skills, but may end up not having as strong areas in their brain in those areas of mathematics or arts or other things that they may be predisposed to, but they've been so involved in that survival skill. As they feel safe and stable, they're going to be able to grow new neurons. And they're going to be able to learn new things. But it has to be done in a safe and stable environment. Otherwise, those survival neurons are going to be the ones that are taking over. They're going to be the ones that are leading all the time. Because the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's in charge of thinking, all the cognitive pieces, doesn't work at the same time as your survival brain does. And when a child is living in that survival brain, like it was there in the video, that thinking brain is not able to develop in the way that it should. Safe, stable homes and relationships are the only things that are going to help that brain be able to develop so that child has the ability to think clearly, be able to plan for their future instead of living in that moment. Now, I have heard through a number of the researchers that our brain continues to develop new pathways as long as we're alive. So that gives me hope that there is no time that is too late for a person. And I don't know how many of you maybe have worked with some older people, but that recognition that there are some people who get into their 40s and 50s and are able to turn their lives around after years of addiction and trauma. And we don't know what that's all about, but I'm pretty sure it has to do with suddenly they have people in their lives who really care about them and support them. So it doesn't matter what time those mama elephants come into a child's life. It could be when they're 40, like what happened with me, or it could be, even later. But as long as they start to being able to use that part of their brain. So there's hope. There's, if somebody says to me, oh, he's 15 years old, they're doomed. Actually, I heard Chief Willard's, he's now working for, he's at the U.S. Marshal's Office, but he was at an event yesterday and he was talking about his childhood and growing up in a home with 8 brothers and sisters where his parents, his father beat his mother, and the police came in and just looked at them and said, you kids are doomed, you're just bad kids. And now here he is. He's been in the military. He's been a police officer. He now works for the U.S. Marshal's Office. So we can think of a lot of people who had those lives where people would look at them and say, you're not going to be any good. You're just going to live. You're just trash. And they managed to turn it around. And whether or not that's science or spirituality or just safe and stable households, I'm not going to say. But I think there's a lot of things that can take place for that.
So back on when you're talking about historical cultural context, normally childhood trauma that occurs in that about commonality, ages, how can you safeguard or use the start thinking, oh well, everybody has ages.
I just, this is just off the top of my head, and I'm sure I'll come up with something better tonight. But it's that looking at somebody and saying, I know you've had a lot go on, and I want you to know that things have happened to other people too, and I hope you're able to connect with them at some time. But even though a lot of people have this happen to them, it shouldn't have. And we want you to feel safe from now on, because we can do a better job at protecting you in the future. Oh, I can get fired up on that. Is that really the world you want to live in? It's number one. Have you, start taking a look at all of this trauma, look at it from a historical perspective. And when we look at generational trauma and historical trauma and the things that it leads to, why would we not want to stop that cycle and have a better world rather than letting it continue?
Yeah, I had a question for you. So with your experiences and knowledge, do you have like a message for these people in the prevention world? What are the things that you would recommend in terms of direct strategies and environmental strategies to really make a difference?
Well, I have a real hard time with the word prevention, I just have to say, because to me, it's always, something's already happened, but you're trying to prevent any future stuff from happening. I am a big fan of the family support network that we have in this state. for families of young children. I think those if parents getting involved in that, if they have young children, I just feel like the more support that you can give to a family. I feel like any sort of peer support programs for adolescents where they can find something meaningful to do with their lives, that they can feel that they have a skill, something that they can use for good. I do a presentation for kids and parents where I talk about superheroes and how superheroes had adverse childhood experiences and their enemies also had adverse childhood experiences, but the difference between being let's think of one, Superman and being Lex Luthor are the fact that Superman had the Kent family, and then there's also a point where the superhero makes a choice. And so, but people can't make a choice unless the choices are available for them. So a lot of the prevention work is about putting in place choices and letting them know what their choices are. So just going with that and having safe and stable people that can be with them as they're making those choices. Yeah. Uh-huh. And a lot of times while a person is making their way and they're feeling really well, to them success means I no longer have these people in my life that were supporting me. I can no longer be involved in the systems, but reminding them that there are other ways that they can have support, even if it's being a peer supporter, so that they have that, so that they still have connection with those places that help them or supported them, I prefer that word. Because yeah, it's that, oh, I'm doing really well, and then all of a sudden I've got nobody. I've let all of my support go, and they warned me about this, and if I go back, they're going to say I told you so. And so you want to say, I'm here whenever. You know, you're going to, and I would even start early and say to them, there's going to come a time when you're not going to want to see me anymore. When you're not going to want to stop by anymore, or you're not going to want to go to a meeting, or because you're going to feel like you're doing so well. And that's perfectly normal. But I also want to let you know that that's a place where sometimes that means that you do need more support and that you could possibly slip back. And I don't want that to happen to you. So I'm going to always be able to, so somebody will always be available to you. I'm always really weird about saying I will always be the one that guy that I arranged, I ended up leaving the agency and he had a meltdown. So yeah, so it's about making sure somebody's there to help along the way. Yeah.
More like a question is more common, but I feel like that model also applies to struggle with detection.
Mhm.
That, you know, fine, for them, and then they just fall right back to the bottom.
Why should I bother?
So I just think it can apply to so many different examples. After you try to address prevention,
be a bigger part of the frequency. So for example, we're thinking of kids who constantly get, many kids go to school and say, I'm gonna get suspended today, so I can go for 3 days and be at home. So when the teachers see the problem, they're seeing the solution. So the solution isn't suspending the child, figuring out what other things can we do to put in place for them. So, yeah, so I see prevention and seeing just that break, that it's their solution, and figuring out what a better solution is they can work with. Exactly, thank you. Do you want me to repeat that? Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to repeat it? I'll give you the mic.
Just making sure that we're putting it, she liked what was said about what people see as as we see as the problem, people see as the solution to the problem. And sometimes people, I guess to paraphrase it, don't want to give up that solution until they have another choice. And kids in school will receive suspension. The kids will come in and say, I'm going to get suspended today, so I can spend 3 days at home. We see that as the problem. The kids see that as the solution. But what can we do instead of to help that child stay in school is a productive coping skill for that child so that they don't resort to that particular solution.
Just a comment, I love the elephants. And what struck me about the elephants was it just seemed to me like when an individual finally gets to a place like Alcoholics Anonymous or something like that, kind of a group, and they're immediately surrounded by these elephants that know where they've been. And I don't know, that just struck me very.
Oh, I love it because it's not just one person who's trying to help that person. It's a community, and elephants run in a herd, and they take care of that baby. Yeah.
And especially when you're going from a situation where none of that is said, and people are just saying, "What's wrong with you?" Like it says in the presentation.
Yeah, what's wrong with you? Well, I can't tell you what's wrong with you. When you look at it, you didn't have any mama elephant. That's it. All right. I'm going to end it.
Yeah, we can just go back and forth with break, and then we'll continue the conversation. But thank you, Linda, so much. So 5-7 minutes, you guys can chat or rest the background. There's coffee or tea right out in the front.
You're right. For those of you who don't know Lisa, she is a senior consultant at JFI and Community Health Institute. And so she is been around for the last 20 plus years and has a wealth of knowledge and experience related to the field of prevention, as well as the substance misuse continuum of care, including treatment and recovery support services. And so she's going to help us walk through how prevention work connects to ACEs, as well as to help identify gaps and how we can connect or how we can support ACEs in New Hampshire. This conversation in the next hour or so will be reviewed, and we're going to talk about it more during our planning team meeting to really think about how we can help develop a framework and then continue the conversation in November. So your input is going to be valuable to help, continue this conversation. Just a reminder, if you are going to make a comment or ask a question, please speak as loud as possible. And then Melissa's going to be walking around with the microphone as well. So we encourage you to use the microphone.
Thank you. Do I need the microphone? Yeah. All right. So this hour was designed to hear from you. Based on your experiences in the field, what you feel is already happening to support addressing adverse childhood experiences better, in particular in relation to preventing substance misuse. both at the direct service level and at the environmental level. So you can kind of share some stories about what you're doing or your community partners are doing. And then the state really would like to hear where some of the gaps exist in addressing this issue, so that they can start doing some strategic thinking. They actually want to develop a logic model and maybe put some resources more to this particular issue. So this is a chance for you to kind of tell the story of what's happening in communities. So let's hear what direct services and environmental strategies are happening right now that are linked to adverse child experiences. Yep. We're excited to see our first together. That is collaboration between many community partners, but really the key people fighting this forward in a focus on the food department and the food community. They have a partnership with the district just to be bridging some of those gaps in the system. And I know that they're getting some great TA and support from Manchester, who is really innovative and starting this work. So that's a recent development that we're excited to be at. Great.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question? What is the team doing? Like, what is it exposed to?
What happens is if there is a trauma in the home that was impacted, so if dad is arrested, maybe the unintended consequence of this substance is removed from the home, children are in the presence of that. When they go to school the next day, they're not often thinking about how's that going to impact them and who are the players that need to know to really provide background to what that students and their families. And so they come up with, they work with an attorney and come up with a waiver. The families can sign off on so that everybody can share information and ensure that anyone impacted by that arrest or whatever, any kind of event like that, that they would be supported provided by the school family. And I think the family report centers will be able to support with this. So I think the partnership is really, I will say, in our region, it looks a little different. We are really different from your culture, but it's a lot of it is good.
Great. Thank you very much. That's a great example. Yep.
So to piggyback off that, Encounter our ours is, we're also receiving latitude from Manchester program, and ours is set up pretty similar to theirs, but we have Riverbend and Concord Police Department, and we're actually partnering with the Merrimack County Human Services, where they are actually employing an ACERT coordinator who will coordinate all of the ACERT efforts. So
Great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Other things going on. Yep.
So the implementation of social emotional learning in high schools, offering students opportunities like yoga and other alternative learning experiences that take place outside of the classroom, especially outdoor oriented activities, which seem to have a real positive effect.
Great. Thank you. Yep.
So, in some
Southern part of the state, near part of Greater National Public Health Region. We have been working on developing a trauma-informed community. So we've held a summit, a raising awareness summit, and we are also bringing in speakers to just inform the community about trauma-informed care, what it looks like, language that we use, and just bringing awareness to that. And we have also developed a children's resiliency retreat, which serves children that are impacted by a family member's substance use disorder. And it's a monthly retreat that children learn about the disease and learn healthy resilience, healthy coping strategies for themselves. And we bring a lot of creative arts therapies into that as well. And we also provide social emotional learning at the Boys and Girls Club of Souhegan Valley. And we collaborate heavily with our school systems. So we're doing a lot in that area as well. And we are about to kick off an allergy group.
Great. Thank you. And you're here. Pass the mic. Getting my work at it.
Get all your steps in. Just piggyback offing the social emotional learning, the Dairy School District has added in the Choose Love program into the curriculum this year.
I just saw that in the paper, and I thought, oh, cool. Great, thank you. Other examples of this work in communities? Yeah.
So Carroll County, the public school systems in Carroll County put a lot of investment. Kingston Regional High School did an all-day training for all staff last school year. SAU 9 in Conway hosted a 2-day social emotional learning conference that was open to teachers statewide. So they trained teachers in our region, but also expanded that reach beyond that region. Last year, Kennedy High School hosted a film screening of Resilience with a community panel, and there will be follow-up community awareness raising activities that will come out of that. So there's a lot of investment happening in training of education.
Great, thank you. Other ideas? Yeah.
So we have been super fortunate to have some people who can actually do this.
It's been really nice, but basically, we have some folks working in pediatric practices. So first of all, they're embedding family resources into the practice. So folks can literally go sign up immediately to get services. Another thing that they're doing is basically going into the practice and having an assessment to say, how can we make the practice more recovery friendly? And then they do short PDSA psychology to improve on that. And then other than that, I think it's just a little bit of like you were saying, we're doing probably from child care training.
Great, thank you. Other examples of this work happening in communities? Yeah.
So most of what Nancy said is very much related to all of this. So I guess as a summary, I would say like our youth focused programs, in the moment, we are surrounding people with tons of awesome parent elephants, and we are giving them those skills to go back to their communities and grow into those parent elephants with people around them. And our parenting program takes them already like parent elephants, maybe want to learn a few more skills to be like stronger, more resilient parent elephants, and helps them like go be even more awesome parent elephants than they may already be, or like wherever they're starting from, they're gonna be more awesome parent elephants. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Different programs that have been going on for quite some time in the Manchester area. Luckily, we have Anna Thomas as our health director. And that's been her focus for a very long time too. All those programs have been ongoing for quite some time. What we are making happen today, Manchester Public Health Network has been doing is supporting all those programs and also building resiliency within our schools, working with our youth and our parent. Our whole focus has been to engage, educate, and empower. One of the things we're doing is with our kids in all of our schools is giving them the opportunity to learn leadership skills and how they can feel that they can matter and make a difference in their community. Do leadership trainings with them, and then whatever their interest is, whether it's substance misuse, which first, but the kids get involved in various things, whether it's advocacy or substance misuse, and then they go and train. We do the peer model where they get empowered to learn about these skills and then go down into the lower grade. The high school is, well, we also have college students going to high school going to middle school, and middle school is going to the elementary school. And building that resilience within them. So,
great, thank you. Other things happening in the environment? Yeah.
I told Lisa to do this because I'm good at saying it over and over. And she said no. I'll say that's what she said, but that's not exactly what she said. So in Nashua, we have been working on building a strategic framework to respond to health emerging health issues and overall health issues within the community. That's really based on a framework of ACEs and trauma-informed care. So it's working right now with our FAC executive committee, but at our annual meeting in October, we're rolling it out to the rest of our FAC partners and additional folks. So trying to get everybody to really focus on providing trauma-informed approaches in the work they do, and to get training and education for their staff. So it's not only in the work that we do, but also for the people that we work with, because we know it's not an us and them. I mean, anybody's affected by ACEs and everybody's affected by ACEs. So we're hoping to, at our annual meeting, we're going to do a combination of trainings and workshops where it's an interactive experience to identify how we can make changes within the community and within our organization. One of the things we signed at the meeting yesterday, they are implementing social emotional learning curriculum in the schools. So they are using the Choose Love curriculum. And our plan is to move into phase 2 of this, where we're going to develop up to 8 cohorts of folks that are going to be under different topics that align with the CDC ACEs framework, and such as early childhood education and so forth. They'll have a 6-month training and research early time period, and then 6 months for planning and strategy development, and then into implementation after that to implement some of these changes in their own organizations.
Great, thank you. That's a lot. Other things to share about what's happening in your communities? Okay, let's turn it to gaps. So where are the gaps? The state wants to hear what populations, what services, what resources are not being reached or not available to address adverse childhood experiences. Money, staff. Increase in demand. Of what? Supply and demand of what? Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead. One of the areas that we're deal with that help us trying to get this stuff with Al-Anon on our culture. There's actually resolution to learning, solution. So AA group, so the national AA has but Al-Anon does not groups to a certain part of the people. So depending on the institution, most colleges want them to allow there's churches, also when they so that's very to work on that. There is language that the State Department of Insurance has provided to make those, so then actually that we can go into how is they're actually great. Thank you. Yep.
I worked in residential treatment for 10 years, and I would say that we asked to model for youth, adolescents, and young adults who are in residential, particularly, for substance misuse or disorder. So a high degree of cases, there's almost 90% youth trauma state in those environments because the model is based on rather than trauma. So that's
Thank you. Trying to get it all down. Great, thank you. Next one in the back. Yeah.
One of the things that I'm going to do is I'm better wrapped around other companies and with minors. One interesting, one of the things that I serve at me and there in service day is I told mention the on-screen planning. But one thing that was key show from that meeting was that we're doing some local workers business on not utilizing as a anymore for some of these things. And one thing that I learned is grab them and enter them into a continuum of comprehensive supports inside the team. And again, we're working with family resource centers in the district on some of that, but I thought it was a much smaller percentage of students we were talking about in my region, and I'm learning that from others. The homeless percentage is a large piece, but the unaccompanied minor piece is bigger than I thought. So,
Thank you.
I think something that
Compassion. Okay. Do you want to explain maybe what resources might support addressing that better?
It's the one thing about putting down money and staff, kind of for what?
So what funding, how would you address compassion? What would you use the money for?
For me personally, more background services for personal in terms of and the health. We actually do that. Something like that that's more regional and more frequent.
Yep. Okay. So they have their mental health.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. Thank you.
The National Youth Department got a grant to do the health first aid for about 80% of their staff. And part of the curriculum talks about compassion fatigue and how to take care of themselves and make sure that they can
Okay.
So, and as part of that, they also have like changed their
The microphone.
The Nashua Police Department got a grant to do mental health first aid for about 80% of their staff is the goal. They have created a structure where they have supports in-house for first responders who see something in the community, but they also have an agreement with another police department that if it's a really large scale situation that they can reach out to another police department to come in and help debrief on those situations. So they've been doing a lot of work on mental health, which I think is great.
Great, thank you.
Okay, if I can tag on to that, so one of the things, can you hear me or can you on the microphone? So one of the things, there is a whole program in training that is for critical response for first responders. And one of the things I think when we talk about pockets, not only, but there are a lot of young adults in the first responders. So if you think about young police officers, young firefighters, think of prison workers, right? A lot of these folks are going in at 17, 18 years of age. And I just recently did a stress management. I was given 45 minutes with the Hudson Police Department. But it was great because that's one of the first time, it's actually the first time they brought in an external clinician or any kind of anyone in the mental health profession. It is against their comfort level, their comfort zone, and they are doing more programs like this. But one of the things, again, if we're looking from a state level where we could use some influence, and there are some police officers and other first responders that are really behind this. They can't get the state or the training institutes behind this stuff. So what they're asking for is having a class during either Fire 1, Fire 2, or in one of the the police officer trainings, or again, or the prison guard trainings, giving these folks stress management skills while they're in school. That's not happening. And so they don't have the skills and they don't have those abilities. And to be honest, that's a population that really likes their alcohol. And that's what they use, and they're very open about it, and it's a norm. So I think that's really important. And maybe that's an area where the state can assist.
Thank you. Yep.
So I work as young adult strategies, and I just think, from the state level, we're talking about having support, and everyone's using the word mama elephant, but young adults really have no support if they are not enrolled in a community college that has support. And I think our New Hampshire community need to do a much better job of providing safe places, recs, you know what I mean? Like we have YMCA's, we have communities, and then there's nothing for young adults who want to be involved in their community with peers in positive ways. I don't know how that looks, but it's a need, it really is. We try to drive young adult strategies, which is a curriculum based at 18 to 21-year-olds. They don't want to take a class. They want something to do that's positive, that can help support themselves.
Great.
We're just gonna pop in.
The other group that has come up in our region is just paraprofessionals. A group who obviously can be really great with trauma and trauma development. And just the need for training around trauma counseling.
Thank you. There's someone right in front of you. Oh, right here.
I think there's been a lot of great work done around stigma in terms of environmental messaging around substance use disorders specifically, but I think there's a lot we could do more around that bigger concept of getting help, especially maybe targeting an aging population in New Hampshire so that there can be, those generational gaps in terms of how socially acceptable it is to, get supports in terms of therapy or get supports in terms of social services. And then also just something that really, and I don't know what this is, but messaging that really gets to that kind of, libertarian, live free or die aspect of New Hampshire culture that is by definition really anti-supports of any kind, especially at the public health level. So maybe some messaging in general around reducing stigma for assistance, but then also kind of thinking of some of those specific groups that are going to be more resistant to that message.
Great. That's great detail.
I think another part where it comes with stigma messaging is for getting parental supports. I think that a lot of parents feel like if they ask for help, they're bad parents, and it's the opposite. And I think we need to do a better job at having that language or some environmental stuff to go out with.
Thank you. Other thoughts on gaps, populations, services, resources? Sorry.
I think the sustainability program, we have grants that, allow for the startup of a program and then they're well established and that funding goes away and they may not have continued funding. But even beyond the funding, I think there's a mindset of some programs. So for Dover, for example, we had 3 youth deaths within the last 2 years, 2 by suicide, 1 an accidental death. And we would have a team come in and provide support in the schools for 5 to 7 days. And I think the mindset of, okay, we came in, we provided all these supports, everything's back to normal, is just not realistic.
Thank you. Rachel?
I've been made familiar with a program called Handle with Care. It's out in West Virginia. Are others familiar with that? It's working in partnership between the law enforcement and schools, so that if a law officer is at a home or place in the community where some sort of traumatic event occurred and there are children there, he or she notifies the school. So they get a TWC stamp next to their name on the attendance record. So it's a very quiet way for the teacher to know that if Jesse is acting out, it may be because they experienced a traumatic event the night before at 3 a.m. and didn't sleep, and it could have been a parent. And so it's a way of allowing the teacher an opportunity to have a traumatic informed response to the acting out behavior. And the whole school is working around addressing that individual child's needs without even saying it or labeling them.
Sounds like that ACERT team. Yeah.
For that area,
Right.
to really adopt a whole research, that could be a nice alternative.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
You just mentioned the communities who don't have the resources to do that full ACERT model. Can you just explain maybe how yours is funded? How does your community have the resources to do that?
That's something that Clayton Community Services went after. I'm not sure where staff is talking about money here. They obviously do it. But I'm saying in terms of staff, when you're looking at capacity wise, being able to do that, I do think that there has to be a strong institution, especially around that elite school district. We experienced something early on that looked like it would have been problematic, but luckily we worked through it. But if the relationship isn't quality, I don't know how that would be successful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
I come from Rochester Police Department, and we are fortunate enough that we have SROs in all of our schools. So that piece, as we attended, which ironically Linda's not here now, we just had the ACER training yesterday for police departments at the standards, and we talked about the challenges of implementing that because of the funding. But we manage as a district, we've been doing it around all of our trauma cases. When an overdose occurs or something else traumatic, our SROs are the first ones that are alerted by the officers on scene. So that way the next day they know that that child coming into school to expect something, or why they aren't coming into school and they kind of do show up. So there's ways to get around the funding challenges, but it's not easy. And to have that whole team would be huge, because we can only be one officer who's implementing something in a school setting. It's that family piece that's kind of missing.
Thank you. Other gaps? Celeste, you have your hand up.
I just wanted to speak to the funding. We did look into it in our community, and I'm very jealous of all the communities that have implemented it. When we had the facilitators come from Manchester, they seemed to think that there was a lot of funding coming to support this because it's such a hot topic right now. And I know Senator G.G. has put in some legislation to have funding for this coming, hopefully we're approved, but it's such a hot topic that there's a lot of places that are going to be having funding in the public budget.
Great. So federal funding might be on the horizon soon. Okay, thank you. Okay, before we turn to what can the state do, any other gaps? All of it does, but
Yeah, it might go into that next one better, but the consistency of these programs, yet not one size fits all. So we talk about ACER and implementing that, and just talk about there might be a great opportunity for those communities that can't do the full-blown ACER. Just one of the issues I think I have, and I'm not getting political here, people, so don't jump on me. Coming from Manchester, it's a tough topic right now, but one size doesn't fit all. So when the state implements something, if they do implement any of these things, they have to look at the varied communities in this state. What works in Manchester and Nashua or Harvard does not work in Berlin. And so a
consistent support for flexible and community-driven response. What do you think?
brilliantly said. That's why you're there now.
Great, thank you. Any other gaps? Yep.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that one of the gaps might be in the language related to treatment. We speak a lot about resiliency, which is a good word, but in my mind, resiliency is we bounce back to our pre-traumatic state. So maybe unconsciously that doesn't really foster growth mindset versus maybe anti-fragility, which is that some things and people actually grow and develop through stress and become stronger at the end of that process rather than simply bouncing back to some well state. So kind of the difference between healing and growth.
Thank you.
thought about that word, resiliency too. It seems like I'm always on the bench, always defending instead of driving. Yeah.
Just really quickly,
Yeah.
regarding the funding, my colleague just texted me. It was Resource Center. It was a preschool development grant that they used as startup funds for their Thrive coalition. To
Thank
get
you.
it off the ground.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thrive Coalition, that's a great name too. All right, now we're going to turn to how can the state support this? Obviously, we could just say, we'll just do all this. And we, I think, sometimes are keenly aware of some of the things that prevent the state from probably running as smoothly and as supportively as they could. But what is your message to the state that many of you have contracts with? How can they support this work better? Yep.
The state needs to really think it through the first time. We get half-baked ideas that come up and everybody jumps on them and whoops, nope, we're going to change the way it goes. It needs to be thought through. We need to talk with the people who are going to have to implement it before they put out an RFP. Please.
Thank you. Other messages to the state about how to support your work more or better?
So I think there's a place for decision makers at the state to be part of regional and statewide conversations about access to affordable housing and making some real efforts to change the situation that we have with homelessness. We have families who have jobs who are living in tents when it's 10 degrees and there's 3 feet of snow on the ground. We have adolescents, like Kelly said, that are unaccompanied minors who are homeless. And it doesn't matter what curriculum we put in place or what support group or what program we put in school or daycare. Back to what Linda said about if we're not taking care of these basic needs of shelter and food and safety, then there's very little that we can do to impact it in the long run unless we kind of get this could be a collective voice from the prevention community to be a part of those conversations that are happening in regional planning commissions and such like that are the areas where some big decisions can be made that incentivize the building of affordable housing or giving people a pathway to accessible housing.
Great, thank you. During Linda's talk, I looked at that Maslow's hierarchy and I thought, well, this would be a good way to kind of design the response to this issue, kind of have that response at all levels of that hierarchy. Other ideas? Feedback from the state. Pam.
When the discussion takes place for how to implement programs and solutions, have people such as these people on the road here, the boots on the ground, be part of that discussion of the realistic approach of the program, how it would look in all of the communities across the state. And not just the idea of implementing a program. Sometimes at the state level, it looks great, it looks clean, it looks organized, but sometimes when it gets down to the community level, which we're at, it doesn't resonate that way. So I'd like for them to include the community level people for that implementation piece. The realistic,
not stay up in theory all the time, really listen to what's happening on the ground. Over here. Oh,
So I think just to piggyback on what Pam said, maybe holding focus groups within the community around these issues. So you can hear from the community members, right? Thank you.
Any other feedback to our state? Yeah.
Super basic, but I feel like voices are loud when it comes to treatment and recovery. And they need to be equally as loud for prevention, early identification of problems and intervention.
Okay.
Equally as loud.
Thank you.
And they should be loud for treatment and recovery. I just want to see that also. We're proud to continue that.
I don't scribble something, then I forget it, so thank you. Other thoughts on how the state can support this work better? Oh, go ahead.
I think that big picture way, and this definitely what County saying, is having more of a focus on those fiscal benefits of investing in prevention, and really looking at, while it is also, again, super important to invest in treatment and recovery, there's a different bang for the buck that the state and state businesses can feel the effects of from investing in prevention. There's tons of research out there that supports that. And on a really small level, I think the state supporting its own staff, it feels like folks who work for the state at this level, there's so few of them, and it feels like they're stretched really thin. And so looking at kind of that structure, because I certainly want more money invested in prevention, but if there isn't that oversight, especially for newer staff members and newer programs or newer organizations, to not have that kind of resource to then check back with or have someone who has that time to spend with them, then we're not investing as well as we could.
Great. All right. Anything else? Back to the state to help them work on their strategic planning in concert with you around nutrition.
I'm just reiterating, I know I said it earlier, but on that piece of paper is having the state work with national insurances for programs like Al-Anon, how to make that easily accessible to all areas, so that they can go in and provide those types of programs. Also for looking and supporting mental health training, advanced training with first responders, being mentioned, with state employees, state prisoners, not only for their own self-care, but for the care of those that they're working with.
Thank you.
This is super basic too. I think the state is headed in this direction, but the more holistically we can be looking at prevention, the better.
Thank you. All right. Any final thoughts? All right, I'm going to just wrap up with a couple of sentences, and I don't know if Melissa and Rachel want to talk about what's coming next. But this, I think the idea is that we're going to take this feedback from you and deliver it to the state, and they're going to work on how to prioritize adverse childhood experiences more in their prevention investments. And there will be probably some logic model making coming out of this as well. So I think there'll be more information in the November meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you to everyone for being so sharing and having that conversation, not feel like it was just everyone staring at Lisa. I really appreciate all of your input.
This was great input.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna turn this back on, see if it goes right back on.
So you have your slides in front of you. This is not turning back on. I just wanted to remind everyone that our next meeting is November 6th, and we're going to be focusing again on the topic of ACEs. We're probably going to be reaching out for some practice perspectives. So 2 or 3 people who are doing this to kind of share a little bit more in depth of what they're doing, and then we'll continue this conversation and maybe provide a kind of a frame about statewide what's happening with ACEs. So that's to come. Don't forget to fill out your evaluation, especially if you want that CPS credit. You really need that evaluation turned in to administer those certificates. And please return your name tags. We just bought these for the communities of practice because we thought they kind of, for those in discussion, when you change groups and stuff, it helps so you can remember people's names. What else? There was something else I needed to say. I guess I'll give you the rest of your afternoon back. I hope that everyone noticed that we did extend the meeting till 12:30 because we wanted to make sure that everyone had enough time to share and have that discussion and not feel rushed. So I appreciate you all staying for that extra time, and we're out a little bit early. So I'll give you the rest of your day back, and I hope to see you all in November. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, that sounds very new.
It is new.
Oh.